and now I must achieve this certain level. And I believe I just psyched myself out and I burned myself out. I went into the audition for the competition and it just went upside down.
My guest today is Dr. Ludwig Treviranus. He's a pianist, composer, and teacher. He studied undergraduate music at the University of Auckland, where he also did his master's under Ray DeLeo. He then went off to the States to do his doctorate at Florida State University under Reed Gainsford. He's had a lot of success in competitions overseas, including as a finalist in both the Beethoven International Piano Sonata competition in Memphis, Tennessee, as well as the Florida State Music School competition, Chopin competition. He's performed as a concerto soloist with the Wellington Youth Orchestra and the Taranaki Symphony, as well as touring with Sole Mio. He's also a sought-after solo recitalist and chamber musician throughout the country. He's toured in Wellington and Auckland, and he started as a music performance fellow at the University of Waikato in 2020. He's an adjudicator, masterclass presenter, a composer, which we'll talk about later on. And so, Ludwig, it's always a pleasure to speak with you. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on today.
Gosh, he sounds like a lovely man. Kia ora, Fergus. Thanks for having me on.
No, thanks for coming here. I want to ask you, sort of by way of introduction, what were your early formative experiences with music?
Well, the piano that was sent over to us from my great-grandmother in Wiesbaden arrived when I was about 3 years old. One of those very old oak pianos with the candle holders, the swivel seat. So it was sent in a container all the way from Wiesbaden to Upper Hutt. And the story goes that it was a favorite toy of mine. So Mum and Dad would often put me on the piano and play around with the fists. And then, so that was the piano at home, but there was also a lot of singing and music playing at church. And we had a lot of family gatherings as a youngster, coming from a Samoan family. We always had guests over. And so there was, from as young as I can remember, there was always singing, there was always dancing. So I guess from that early age, music was always there. Then there's also the story that Mum and Dad often had records and music playing when I was inside Mum as a young baby. So I take it there was always music as a youngster.
So you grew up in this very sort of musical, lots of singing kind of house. So what drew you towards more like sort of classical piano and then studying piano at university? What was the story there?
It's funny that, so the teacher that I had, her name was Helen Kapma, and I met her when I was about 5.5, and she happened to be a piano teacher of one of my buddies from primary school. And so she started me off with the Zuki method. And so we studied a lot of pieces by ear, the twinkle variations, a lot of clapping games, rhythmic work. And so through her, I guess I learned a lot of the classical music. And so I had her for about 5 years, and it just kind of fit. I don't know, I guess the music I enjoyed. I was always taught to tell stories with my music. And from there, I was able to create different sounds at the piano. Started doing competitions when I was about 10 or 11, and those were all in the classical category. And I seemed to do pretty well. And so that was encouraging to me, you know, when you're a youngster and you get a second prize or a first prize and a $20 voucher for Wickles. And so I would have to say it was the teacher for those early years. And so classical was always there. Yeah.
And then you ended up in the States doing
your
doctorate.
So fast forward. So I studied with Mrs. Kappa for about 5 years, and then right throughout high school, I was with a lady called Gillian Bibby, and I was with her from about Form 1 to Form 6. And through her, I started to explore different varieties of music, different genres. But also at my high school, I studied jazz, and I was invited to play in the jazz combo. And so things really kind of started from there, between the age of about 11 and 16. That's where my playing really developed. Playing in on ensembles as well. A lot of chamber music. New Zealand has the great New Zealand chamber music competition, the secondary schools. So I participated in that. And then when I was about sixth form, my teacher said to me, listen, do you want to continue for seventh form or do you want to go and study music? And it was quite clear that music was something that I had to go and do. So I left after sixth form and I went straight to the University of Auckland. 3 different teachers there. It was busy. I had Brian Sayre, studied with Michael Houston, studied with Ray DeLille. And after the study of about 5 years, I decided that I'd go and write some music for a children's theatre company. And so I did a little bit of that. So we did it was Tim Bray Productions. We did Roald Dahl's The Quits. And I love that. Something about writing for children's theatre and being a narrator brought together all my skills as an improviser, as a classical artist, as a storyteller together. But then Ray pulled me aside and said, hey, would you consider doing some further study? There's somebody that I'd like you to meet. And that's where I met Reid Gainsford. And so Reid is Kiwi and he came over and he was giving a talk at the university on the music of Olivier Messiaen. And
as one does.
Yeah, I fell in love. I fell in love
Yeah.
not only with his sound, but also just the way that he would break down the concepts, the way that he would speak, the language that he would use. And so I pulled him aside and I said to him, hey, listen, my name is Ludwig. Is there any chance that I could play for you sometime? He said, sure, meet me tomorrow morning. We clicked. And so that was in 2008. And then he said, come over to Florida and study with me. I said, Florida? Yeah, Florida State University in Tallahassee. So that's how that happened, Fergus. So there's a lot of study at the University of Auckland, but that was a turning point when I decided, all right, I'm going to leave the country and go and study music further with Reid. So that was 2008 to 2012. Yeah.
It sounds like you never really sort of, I don't know, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you never really thought of it as like, oh, I'm here to study classical music. You know, my thing is classical music. It sort of sounds like you have all these different, you know, jazz, and you had the stuff for kids, and you have all these other, and the Samoan background growing up, a lot of singing. So it's not just sort of instrumental classical, you know, box going on, which I wanted to ask you actually about this thing about, you know, music and language. We sort of often hear these comparisons between like music and language. Is music a language? Do you have any thoughts on that? Do you think music is a language?
Music is definitely a language because it's communicating a message. It's communicating an emotion. It's painting a picture. It's sending energy. And that's exactly what we do with words. A language is between 2 people or a group of people that want to tell stories or get a message across to one another. So when we play music, that's what we're doing. We're really telling a story, except we're using notation and sound. So to me, there's a huge connection between the spoken language and also music. And so when I teach, I'm constantly trying to find not so much the right word, but words that will enable the student that I'm working with to find that sound, whatever sound it is that they're looking for. Furthermore, I would like them to speak with me because I'm interested to hear the language that's going on in their head.
Yeah.
And then my job is to try and see if I can help them dig further to find that answer, that tone, that color, or that message. So yes, the answer is there's definitely a strong connection between language and music.
What do you think that there's stuff that we express in music, people express in music that you can't express in words? I'm just trying to sort of think about how ubiquitous music is. Like if you go across cultures, across history, there's always been music, you know? So like, is there something that we're trying to express that we have language, but we can't quite get the words to say what we want to say, and so we have to sort of move into music to say what we want to say? I don't know. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah. No, I completely agree. Sometimes there are certain things that with the use of the right word, there's a lot more clarity with spoken word than music. So it goes both ways, but with music often evokes an emotion, a very clear emotion that sometimes words can't quite penetrate or can't readily not assess, what's the word?
Like ascribe or...
Yeah, there's that part of your brain when you hear a particular piece of music and you hear the first chord. There's no word for that. certain harmonies,
Mm.
and you don't want to speak anyway. The music has communicated everything that it needs to communicate, and there are no words for it. But to me, I feel that music hits you quicker than words. It accesses that part of your brain, that memory, much faster than words, which is why when you play a tune for somebody perhaps with Alzheimer's, or if you're performing sharing music at a retirement village, and home on the range. When you say home on the range, the first thing that comes to your mind is da-da-dum, da-da-dum. The melody comes first. It's not so much the words.
Right.
Or even Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. So it's a very strong pull, I would say, in terms of music, being able to communicate something a little deeper or access that part of the brain much quicker than words. Yeah.
There's something primal about it, isn't it? Like, I always get this feeling when I see fire, like a physical, actual fire in front of me. There's like it sort of connects you to your ancestors in a way. It's like this thing has existed throughout human society, human culture. We've always had this relationship with fire, and it's always sort of been there. And music is like it connects us to those who have come before, I guess.
I would have to say so. Music is a collective. Music is collective. It's when you hear a certain tune or you play a certain harmony, and you can actually shift the feel of the entire room. You can shift. I mean, you can do it with words as well. There's no doubt you can do it with words as well. There are certain orators out there. There's a way that they speak and the words that they use that shifts your mindset. But I feel music has the power to be able to do that. Even a 5-year-old can hop onto the stage. They don't necessarily need to have the vocab. Then they don't understand anything about rhetoric, but they play a certain way, and the child feels it. You've seen it before. You've seen 5 or 6-year-olds. There's a certain way that they play. It's not to do with the technique, but they connect with that music. And if you ask them, "Did you know what you just did?" they wouldn't be able to answer you. You see, so that's another point. That's right. That's another point to explore. If a child can access that kind of emotion, clearly they're feeling it much stronger than words. And what's impressive is when they can transfer that on stage. And you're just left thinking, what's going through your head, child? But whatever it is, it's beautiful, and I want more of that.
Yeah, no, same. And it's almost like we spend our lives almost like trying to get back to that. Like we were in that childlike state of all of these different things, and then we grew up and we had all these things develop, insecurities and whatever, and so that sort of pulls us away from who we actually are, I guess. And so we're trying to get back to that. Yeah, it's really interesting.
That's it. So but that's the beauty of music, and that's the beauty of language and learning. We're constantly developing and evolving to try and better understand who we are.
I want to get back to that because I do have some questions about that, but I want to ask about, you mentioned your Samoan side, you also have German side. Obviously both of these, quite rich musical traditions, as you've alluded to. Have these different traditions fed and nourished you in different ways over the course of your life? How have they sort of fed into your understanding of what music is and what it does for people?
It's interesting you say that, because the language, especially Samoan. So just to make this clear, Dad's grandfather is German, and so Dad comes out being half German, half Samoan, but he's the only one that spoke German in the household. But Samoan was the language that was the predominant language as a child growing up. So I always heard Samoan, and the rhythm of the Samoan language, the way it's spoken, the fact that you don't have very many consonances, they're all vowels. Everything was very round. Everything's very warm. It's not talofa. Talofa. Fergus, I definitely reckon that that has fed into the way that I play, the way that I hear, the culture of welcoming people into your home with open arms, making sure that they have a cup of tea, something to eat when they come into your house, and making sure that everyone else is served before you.
Mm.
And so it's a language, but it's also a way of being. And I feel that that's really helped me with finding the warm tones in my music. The German side, I understand that that's really helped me in terms of, especially from learning from Dad, learning more about control, learning more about steadiness, learning more about the traditions of classical music, learning about polish. But it didn't. To be honest, it didn't have as great an impact as the Samoan side, mainly because I was constantly surrounded by the Samoans. But it's there. It's definitely there. The feeling of having my great grandmother sending that piano over, and when I play, I feel the German articulation in my fingers. When I play. Yeah. But I also feel the warmth of the Samoan harmonies. And so it's I don't know. I joke to myself, it's as if I was made to play music. I have to play music. Music is just, as you said, it's such a rich part of the German culture and the Samoan culture. But both cultures as well, they love to feed, they love to serve, they love to entertain. And I'm a born entertainer. And that's just, it's just, and I'd like to learn more about it. And this is why this conversation is exciting, because I seldom dig into how my connection with the Samoan and German culture influences the way that I play.
Right. And I was just interested if it did. But the communal thing is really interesting, like this thing of music as a communal activity, because it doesn't really make sense to have a language or to have music if there's no one around you to share it with, you know what I mean? So that's a really interesting point. What do you get out of practice?
What I get out of practice is, well, number one, it's a better understanding of the material I'm working with, because essentially I'm practicing to better understand music, to better understand playing. Yeah. The other thing I get out of practice is a feeling of improvement, of self-fulfillment, because there's an achievement there. I've unlocked something that I don't understand. And so when I practice, when I was younger, it used to be a chore. To be honest, it was a chore because I had to learn X number of pieces and they had to be a certain level. Whereas now when I practice, I'm practicing to understand. And I'm practicing to understand the pieces the best that I can, so that when I serve it, I can serve the best product that I know. Or let me rephrase that, not so much the best product I know, but I want to present what I've discovered to friends, family, paying audiences. So yeah, that's what I get out of practice. It's also a good chance for me to really learn who I am as a person. How consistent am I? How resilient am I? Practicing for me reveals a lot of characteristics of mine that I love, characteristics that I continue to work on. So yeah, that's a long answer to your question, but
no, that's yeah.
It does answer a lot of questions, and even 30 years later, it's still something that I use as a tool to explore.
Yeah, for sure. This thing of viewing practice as like a self improvement. Improvement's not quite the right word, but a self betterment exercise. It's been one of the most like profound sort of shifts in my own thinking about practice, and it has turned it from being a chore into something that is actually quite fun sometimes. But
well, that's it. It's actually providing you with more power. It's empowering you as you're beginning to understand, and you're gaining more clarity over these quite often challenging concepts that are woven into different shapes and forms. And it's our job as the messenger to unravel And so that becomes that.
Mm.
And it takes time. And if the feeling is, I have to do this because I have to get it done by this time here, or there's a pressure, it becomes a little bit difficult, right, to unravel. But if it's for the sake of exploring and uncovering something new, it just makes it a little more exciting. But it is a muscle and a philosophy that has to be practiced.
Mm.
That's it. It doesn't just come. There will be times where we practice and it still feels like a chore. You're just hitting a brick wall and there's no progress.
Yep.
But you knock enough, and eventually the door opens and you discover something new.
Yeah. So okay, let's practice. What do you get out of performing?
Gosh, man. Anxiety. What do I get out of performance?
Today's podcast is sponsored by Bro and Bro. Bro and Bro is a charity founded by Yen Now, who's also written this book, One Stone, Two Birds. It's a cartoon book with 168 cartoons featuring New Zealand's favourite humorous average Kiwi bros, Pukeko and Tui. So I thought we'd just open it up. I've got my teeth pulled out for $300, and it's only a 5 minutes job, bro. Not fair, bro. Next time ask the dentist to pull it out slowly. So, if that's a bit of you, head over to brobro.nz and also see some of the other fantastic goodies that Yen has over there for you. So thanks again to Bro and Bro for supporting today's podcast.
When I perform, I literally am transported to places that I've never been. There are brilliant highs, there are brilliant lows. There's a feeling of love and appreciation for the instrument. At the same time, what do I get out of performing? I'm taught lessons. I'm learning while I'm performing the whole time, because I have this idea in mind of what I want to create. And sometimes it comes out that way. Sometimes I'm pleasantly surprised. It comes out more exciting than what I'd planned. And then other times it doesn't quite take off. I'm working, but it just doesn't. I have the setup, but my punchline doesn't hit.
Yeah.
So what am I getting out of performing? I'm learning, but at the same time, I'm on this ride. And I love the feeling. I love the feeling of being on that ride. And that actually that goes back to this question of practice. I guess the more carefully I practice, the more I can enjoy that ride and just let go.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing that I have a performance coming up, that's the other thing, and when I get onto stage, I can share what I've been exploring in the practice room, rather than these are all the notes that I need to have in line.
Yes.
And I have to get them in this order.
Yeah.
Because to me, I don't find that very fulfilling. And you should be doing that in the practice room anyway. Get your ducks in a row in the practice room, and then once on stage, you're on a trip. That's what I get out of performing.
Not funny, interesting. A mutual friend of ours, Maria Mo, I was having a lesson with her once, and she said, I don't think she'll mind me saying, she said, Fergus, I think you need more of my out there extroverted energy as a performer, and I need a little bit more of your sort of like calm, so we sort of like, we almost find in music, we find the parts of ourselves that need tuning, need development, need, working on, and we sort of, it gives us a way to go after those in a different sort of way. Which, I
agree. And it's performances. Performance is the platform that exposes, that reveals what needs to be strengthened, and also reveals your priorities. What have you been focusing on? And so once you've practiced the art of, these are the things that I feel are important, this is the message that I want to translate on stage. And the more you get to perform it, the easier it becomes to access that. Yeah.
So how does your teaching influence your performance then? Are you aware of ways in which that has an effect?
Yeah, I feel that my playing in general has improved the more that I teach. And especially having moved to work in tertiary over the last year. And there's a different way of thinking. There's a deeper way of thinking. And because it's on repeat every single week, there's certain topics such as tone production, pacing, grading, interpretation, characterization, the physical requirements. When I sit down to practice, because it's been on repeat, I feel that I'm now a lot more aware of all of these things here because I'm preaching. And so I would have to say teaching has really opened up my eyes, opened up my ears to what I feel is important and how to get that message across on the keys. Yeah. And it's also allowed me to learn new things about playing. And there are old habits that I have that I'm slowly starting to change in terms of breathing, in terms of creating shapes, but also in terms of just letting go. I find that when I listen to old recordings, I just didn't let go as much as I would have liked to. And so I'm now going through this phase of when I play, just trusting the jumps, trusting any kind of gestures that I'm creating, and just go for it, even if it slips. But I'm training my body to just, because this is what I'm teaching all the students, just let go. And once you have that and the muscles are relaxed, the sound changes. It's a much rounder tone that you get out of the piano. So yeah, teaching has really influenced, for the good, my playing.
Yeah, it's almost like when you have to try and figure out how to help someone else solve their problems, it helps you solve your own problems. When you get back to the piano.
It's a win-win.
Yeah,
which is why I love coming to teach, because I'm actually learning myself. I'm like, all right, and I see things that other pianists are doing, not just things that I feel that need to be changed, but really good things as well. A lot of really great playing. I'm like, I might just pinch that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Fergus. Thank you, Tony.
Yeah. What's that quote? Like, good artists invent, great artists steal, or something like that. It's like
great artists steal. That's right.
Do you have a pre-performance ritual, Ludwig? Do you have something that you go through before you perform?
Yeah. So before I perform, I like to just take time by myself in the room. I don't really like too many other people in the room, and just slow breathing.
In the room where you're going to be performing, or the green room?
In the green room. In the green room before I perform. And then so it's just taking some deep breaths, because I just need to slow down the heart rate. And then when I get on stage, it's always a smile and a look out to the audience. It's always a smile and look out to the audience. And then when I sit down to play, I have the tempo in mind. I always have the pulse of the piece, and then I begin. So those are really the three main things, just having the deep breathing beforehand. But one of the things that I'd been working on as well leading up to the performances, actually in 2013, I was going through quite severe performance anxiety. And so I met a doctor, sports psychiatrist called Dr. Lawson McGill. And we worked on this idea of deja vu, which has really helped me, in which leading up to the performance, you start thinking about what the hall looks like and the feelings that you have leading up to the performance. And so you're actually recreating everything in your head so that on the day, nothing is foreign. You've already taken your breaths in the green room. You already know what the hallway looks like. You already know what the color of the seats look like. And so the pre-performance routine actually happens leading up to the concert. It happens beforehand. So by the time I get there, everything is it's no longer foreign. Everything is familiar.
Do you have an idea about what caused that performance anxiety? Like, what was behind that?
I think number one, I hadn't performed in a while. I think it'd been a couple of years. And secondly, I'd put a lot of pressure on myself. I'd recently finished my doctorate. And I guess I thought that, well, now that I have a doctorate, I should be able to achieve A, B, and C. So there was this. I also felt that a lot of family and friends and community were keeping an eye on me. Maybe they weren't. Maybe it was all in my head.
Yeah.
But that's what I had going on in my head. Oh my goodness, I now have
Yeah.
this title, and now I must achieve this certain level, and I believe I just psyched myself out, and I burned myself out. I went into the audition for the competition, and it just went upside down. It really, yeah, and that was really disappointing because that was a very dark time then. Because directly after that, I just shut down for about half a year. And I didn't understand how someone could study for that long and you have achieved this title, nothing comes of it. And you have all these other young people, 10 years your junior, that make it into the competition. And I had used this competition as kind of, it was affirmation that I had made it.
Yeah.
And then that's when a bulb went off. Well, when do you actually make it?
Yeah. Yeah, I can remember.
And how long am I going to allow this doctorate
to
define me?
Yes.
So I know it's getting a little bit deep.
Yeah,
but
no.
That's honestly what happened to me.
Yeah, no, and thanks for sharing.
Yeah, it's a strange thing to talk about.
Yeah, no, it's funny, like this idea of when do you reach the top of the mountain, like I remember when I was at school and I was still doing grade 8, I had this idea that like grade, when you get to grade 8, it's like that's when I'll be a good pianist. And then I got to grade 8, I was like, I'm not a good pianist. And then I did my diploma and I was like, oh, I'm sure, now I'm doing a degree, I'm sure I'm still still not there. It's like, oh, it turns out you never get there. Okay.
Right.
I guess I just have to enjoy the climb,
enjoy the climb and continue assessing what the getting there actually means for you. And so but actually through that, I learned a lot of lessons and a lot of people came to my aid. And it was a good thing that I put up my hand to ask for help, And it just slowly transformed from 2013 up until now, transformed the way that I not just play, but generally the way that I think, the way that I perceive myself, the way that I value myself, and the way that I just carry myself as a person, as a man, as a musician. And so when the opportunity came up to work with Catherine at the university, it felt right. I felt that my mind was at peace. I continue to practice it. I would never ever be foolish enough to say that I have it all sorted together, but I do feel that I've reached a part of my life where I'm very, very comfortable in my own skin, and I've learned a lot of lessons. And so it's nice to be in another arena in which I can share that knowledge and continue learning, really.
I want to switch tack a little bit to your composing. So in lockdown last year, you wrote a piece called The Frontline. Maybe you could introduce that a little bit, talk a little bit about what your inspiration was there. Yeah,
so I've been improvising for the longest time, but I'd never actually really written anything down. And so it was actually my wife who suggested to me, listen, maybe it's about time that you sit down and write down your thoughts. So I'd been playing around with this theme, and I really wanted to write a piece of music that communicated a message. And at that time, it was during the lockdown. It was the lockdown here in New Zealand. It was our first lockdown. Sorry, I tell a lie, it was the second lockdown by this point. The second lockdown, and people were impatient. People were afraid, a lot of emotions running through. But it was interesting observing the doctors and the voluntary workers and the nurses during the time of COVID, just seeing how patient and compassionate they were. And I figured, wow, it'd be interesting to write my own reflection upon their work as a sign of thanks, but also to represent what they bring, the kind of peace and love and aroha that they bring to the community, but also New Zealand as a whole, what we do to try and look after one another, whether you're just neighbors or someone bringing you a food package. And so I ended up sitting down and improvising this piece of music, and I simply called it the Frontline, inspired by all our frontline workers. And then right at the end, I was trying to figure out how to finish it. And I post a little quote of the national anthem right at the end. Quotes of the national anthem right at the end, so that if anyone around the world plays it, they'll know it's a Kiwi brand. You just played our
100%
anthem.
pure, yeah.
It's pure Kiwi ass, bro.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, and so that's my first ever piano composition.
Right, and it sort of came as a kind of improvisation straight away. Because it's interesting, when I was listening to it, like I was listening to it again recently, and I noticed there were all these little elements scattered throughout, and I was like, I wonder how conscious Ludwig is of all these things. You know, it sort of starts with this quite simple, almost like chant-like melody. It's very sort of like childlike, really. And then suddenly voices start to come in, and the harmony starts to get more complex. And then, you know, I hear a few little chords, and I'm like, oh, that's a sort of Lisztian, you know, augmented chord there, and that's a sort of. So do you sort of think about all that stuff consciously when you're composing, improvising? You think, oh, I've got to express this particular thing, so I'm going to use this, or how do you think about all of that?
Yeah, I do. Well, the idea initially for the piece was one voice, so that's when you hear. Followed by a second voice, third voice, fourth voice, fifth voice, and it's the idea of the one person that is singing or perhaps calling out for help, and then one by one people start to come together. So that's the opening. The rest of the piece is made up of harmonies and melodies and, I guess, licks, if you will, from all my favorite composers.
Yeah.
So it's no surprise that you hear Liszt in there, you hear some Schubert in there, you hear some Mendelssohn in there, maybe even some Grieg. There are touches
Schumann?
Schumann, yeah, Kinderszenen, that's it.
Yeah.
There are touches of everything in there.
Yeah.
You could almost say that. I mean, just by listening, you could pick out. You know, if you're a classical buff, you'll be able to catch. You'll be able to catch some of the harmonies and just the way that I write. Clearly, these are the composers that I respect, but not only that, they write in a way that connects with me. So I wanted to do the same thing.
Yeah,
they've created a language, and it's a language that really connects. So I figured, well, let me see if I can use their language.
Yes.
In my piece of music. So I don't know, it must have 6-7 different languages in that one piece. You see what I'm doing there?
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. That's good. You're doing my job for me.
Doctorate.
That's why they pay you the big bucks, Ludwig.
That's right, baby. That's right.
Yeah, no, it
connects us. Exactly.
It connects, you know, it's like we all have our own set of influences, and we sort of take and combine all these different things in different ways, and I guess that's what ends up as being our own creative voice or spirit or whatever.
Right.
But I guess nothing's really new. It's just sort of reshuffling what's come before.
It's reshuffling. I mean, unless you're a real mover and shaker like Schoenberg, literally wanted to go and create their own language, and that's fine too, you know. But the way that I hear, there are just certain composers, I love their sound. I love the sound of the romantics. So Liszt, Schumann, Schubert, go even as, you know, up to Rachmaninoff. And so when you hear my writing, you'll be able to hear similarities. But yeah, no, you've hit the nail on the head. That's just taking up other people's ideas. I'm a thief. A musical thief.
Well, so of course, as I already mentioned, we're very lucky to have Bro and Bro as a sponsor of today's podcast. And so I'm going to read another cartoon from Yen's book, One Stone, Two Birds. All information on your CV's a lie, bro. What kind of job did you manage to get? Sales, bro. They liked my CV. This idea of, what brings people to concerts. If you're like Schoenberg and you're speaking your new language that you've invented because you think it's the way that music should be or where it should go or whatever, it's like, that's all well and good. You can speak your own language, but maybe not many people are going to be that interested in hearing what you have to say because they can't actually understand it,
That's really funny that you bring that up, because when I wrote the piece of music, I also wrote it with that in mind. I want to write a piece of music that people will be able to connect with. So first of all, I like the idea that it has a message. So it gives something for people to think about as they sit. They're not just listening to sounds, but they're actually relating it to a message. And so once I wrote it and I realized that there was a melody, there were some harmonies that you could follow, I was not ashamed at all to share it in public. I mean, so much so that I went on tour with some buddies of mine, the Solemio boys, and we did a 10 concert tour of the country, and they said, I would like you to do a solo. I did not hesitate to say the Frontline, because I had also programmed it. I had written it in a way that I knew these are the kind of sounds and melodies and rhythms that people enjoy listening to.
Yep.
So I think, well, subconsciously, it wasn't just an improvised piece of music with composers that I love. I had the audience in mind. I had the audience. So it was really, I think, an encouragement to me when I had people come up at the end and they said, we really connected with the Frontline. So that obviously the language of Liszt, of Schubert, of Schumann, 150 years old, right? It's still alive. It is still alive. And I'm not talking just the older folks, young people as well. When I play it in school, they're like, oh, I really love that. I was like, yeah, it's classical music.
They're like, what? Classical music is supposed to be boring.
Yeah, you did it without a beat.
Yeah.
Without backup dancers and no auto-tune.
Yeah, and it goes back to the link I was trying to make before about, music being a communal activity. Like, it doesn't make sense standing up and saying something that no one can understand. The point of language, communication, whatever, is to express something to people so that they can understand it and carry that message however they want to.
Right, yeah. But in saying that as well, there are certain people that will use language to try and they're trying to engage a certain circle or a certain demographic or a certain academic group, right? Sometimes like high art.
Yeah.
And you listen to the language and it's quite complex and you have to really sit and listen and have it on repeat. But it all depends on what you're trying to achieve. And I went in there knowing all too well, this is what I want to achieve. I want to write a 3 to 4 minute piece. It's going to have a couple of melodies, not too complicated. It's going to have one big climax and it's going to end with the national anthem. And that was it. And once I had pieced it together, I knew that it would connect. Thank goodness it connected. Otherwise, but it's fine. Had it not connected, that's okay. I returned to the lab.
Yeah, you do the next thing. Yeah.
And that is what it is. Frontline is what it is. And so I'll work on the project. Yeah. Or
and
if I decide to quit. Yeah.
And speaking of next project, you've got your Etudes.
Yes.
I'm not sure. Like, I've sort of heard like little murmurings. I don't know the full story with Etudes. Could you talk a little bit about all of that?
So the Etudes were composed and inspired by young students that I was teaching who love the music of anime. So anime are these Japanese cartoons. They have these really beautiful soundtracks. They're adventurous, they're dramatic. I can't quite describe the sound, but it does have a certain sound. In particular, a composer by the name of Joe Hisashi. And so I was listening to a lot of this music, and my students, more than one, would say, we really like the sound of this. So I got thinking, what if I use that language and a piece of music, but turned it into an etude? And an etude, basically, it's a technical exercise. So I got thinking, and this was during lockdown as well. This was after Frontline. So I started improvising in the anime style. And I was thinking to myself, okay, let me find, and at the time, and I still have, I had Ray DeLeo's book called Fit for Piano, and it's full of different techniques. So I decided, okay, let me just flip to a page. And I found something called wrist circles. So you're doing this on the piano, and I picked a key. So I picked a key, and so that was my task, to write a piece of music that would capture wrist circles in the key of G minor, and it's around about 2 minutes long, in the style of anime. That's where that began. So then I went through and I ended up composing 12. I finished all 12 now, and I recorded them all in the concert chamber. And so now I'm just working to edit them, and then we'll have them published in a couple of months. But once again, it was finding a language.
Yes.
Finding a language that students, or young pianists can connect with. So when they hear it, they want to go to their instrument. I want to play this here because it sounds cool.
Yeah.
Right? What is the definition of cool? Cool is current. So I want to create the current sound. I can't create the current sound, but I know who has. And the surveys show the children have spoken.
Surveys show, yeah.
So anime music is taken over the world, man. K-pop, all of that. There's a certain sound, okay? So you can put that into piano music. And I've tried the best that I can to create these pieces, and then played them with all the training that I have as a classical musician. So that classical music isn't just a style, it's a sound. And as classical musicians, we're really trained to create the most beautiful sounds when we play. And that's the one of the big things that separates classical musicians from musicians that play in other genres. You're really focusing on the tone. So yeah, that's how that came about, 12 Fantasy Etudes.
It's awesome. And it sort of relates to what I wanted to ask you next, which is, if music is a language, what does it mean to be fluent in a language? And how do we get students to that place of being fluent or being more fluent?
So it comes from, well, first of all, learning a piece of music that's at their level, because you got to make sure that they have the technical facility to be able to play all the notes. And then secondly, it's discussing what the piece means to them. When you have something that you really understand, or you have something that you want to, or a point of view, this cup is red and it is a cup. And a child can say that with utmost conviction, yeah? That's fluency, being able to own the product that you're working with. Once they get that there, right, they can move on to the next piece, which is slightly challenging. But fluency comes from, to me, an understanding, control of that language or that feeling, and being able to practice it on the daily, just like this conversation here. How blessed we are that we have a level of English that we can joke, we can be serious, we can be thoughtful, because we've spoken like this before. We've practiced joking and speaking in this matter with other people. So it comes natural, but it's because we know. But it has to start small. And so when you're working with a child, at least, giving them a simple piece of music that they can understand, talking about the emotion or the character of the piece, whether it's a dance or whether it's a song, just get maybe 2 or 3 things that they can own. That there, to me, is fluency, because now they own that interpretation, and it will just slowly build from there. You don't want to tell the student what to do.
Yeah.
Now they're fluent in your language.
Yes.
They're just copying. It's by rote.
Yeah, it's obviously improvisation used to be a much bigger part of the classical sort of tradition than it is now. Do you think improvisation, being able to improvise, being able to extemporaneously express your thoughts musically, do you think that's a part of fluency?
It is. It is. And I think when people improvise, they shouldn't feel that there are barriers to their improvisation. I need to play in this certain key. I need to play with a certain rhythm. Because through improvisation, you start to open up your own thoughts. You start to explore how you're truly feeling. But it also, there's something freeing about improvising, that your sound blossoms. When you're playing a piece of music and you have to play with a certain speed, with a certain tone, you've boxed yourself in. Improvising allows you to be much freer with creating new sounds and being spontaneous, right? And you can then carry that back to your classical piece of music. So you're actually building your library of sounds and imagination on the spot. It's a muscle. And I definitely encourage it. But like I said, you don't need to know all the theory behind it. Sometimes just playing random notes, clusters of chords, or coming up with a certain emotion or an image and playing around with that. That's plenty. That's plenty in improvisation, yeah.
Well, sometimes I think we get confused which way around the theory comes. You know, we think theory comes first, but actually the theory exists to explain the music. You know, it's like someone played a cool chord. They're like, what chord is that? I want to know what chord that is. So they go, okay, how can we explain that? And now we sort of think, oh, we have to learn all of this stuff. And it's like, sometimes maybe it's a matter of like just playing around with the sound first and then understanding it later.
That's it. I think so. Otherwise, you become too bogged down in all the specifics, and then you don't do it at all.
This is maybe a bit of a heavy question. Do you think that this term classical music has a meaning? How would you define classical music? Is there even really a point in defining classical music? What do you think about that?
Yeah. Classical music for me has always been just an expression. It's a form of expression, and it just so happens that you have these composers over the last 200, 300 years that have written in all these different styles that have come under the umbrella of classical. Classical to me has always been a great form of music to tell stories, because there are so many, you can have so many different rhythms and different harmonies and different melodies. You can fit all that into 2-3 minutes of music. And so I have always thought that classical music will always be around in some form or fashion. It's in pop music in terms of how music is structured, with a melody and a harmony. So you've got a melody and an accompaniment. It's in movie soundtracks. It's in folk music. It's the original. It's the foundation.
It's the OG. Yeah.
It's the OG. It is. It might not be in the form of. It might not have that kind of feel anymore.
Yeah.
But it is still there. Classical music to me, yeah, it's an expression. It's a form of storytelling, and yeah, people say that is it dying? Well, it depends. If you're talking about perhaps certain recitals, like a violin recital, a piano recital, yeah, perhaps we don't see them as much anymore. But there are many reasons behind that. It's a big project, and it takes a lot of work to put together recitals, to tour recitals, but also to find audiences that will really understand and appreciate that music. A talk for another time is how to continue building classical music, as it were. But yeah, for me, what I've learned is that when I play music, it's no longer classical music, it's a mixture. And I might put a bit of Mozart in there, I might put a bit of Gershwin, I might work with a singer to mix it up, create a variety concert, because really what I'm playing is music. Really what I'm playing is music. And when I teach it, I'm teaching how to communicate through the piano. And these are the two things that I love, is to tell stories and also explore the sounds of music. specifically the piano, which I'm just, it's a love relationship. It's also a little frustrating, but I want to share my battle with people around me.
Yep.
You know, if people care, like, what are you up to, Ludwig? Like, yeah, let me show you. These are the things that work. These are the things that don't work. If they want to play something for me, and hopefully I can create an environment in which they feel relaxed and open enough to also share some of their vulnerabilities in that piece of music. I know, I've been there. I'm still there.
Yeah, that's hard, man.
It's for reals.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been known to be an adult prodigy. But no, to answer your question, to me, classical music is still very alive and well. It's very alive and well, and it's everywhere. And classical music is, it's a form of expression.
Yeah. What do audiences come to hear? I mean, I have heard you perform a few times. I heard you perform in Taupo a few years ago. Yeah. And the thing that really struck me about the way that you related to the audience was you talked to them, but not in the way that performers might usually talk to the audience, which sometimes has this air of, I don't want to say stuffiness about it, but for you it was very, you were just talking, you were just sort of spinning a yarn about the music, explaining things that were going on. Do you think that plays into like what people come to hear? People come to hear maybe the person sometimes more than the music.
Yeah, a lot of the time people are just coming to feel something. That's it. You can play a whole recital, and the only thing that you'll get from someone would say, you know what, there was so much love on the stage, or you took me back to my childhood. That's it. Seldom you really appreciated the articulation in your scalati, and I love the polyrhythms that you managed to create. No, that's for the practice room.
Yeah.
What the audience is there, and if I'm the audience, I'm there because I want to experience something. I want to experience something new. They play Moonlight Sonata. It's my favorite. I want to go experience the Moonlight Sonata, and that's it. So it's really creating a feeling. And at the end of the day, you don't really remember the words that people say, but you remember how it made you feel.
Yeah. The thing about music too is it's only, you're there in the hall and you're listening to it, and it's a moment by moment thing. And then when it's over, it's gone, you know, like it's not like a painting where you go and you look at the painting and, oh, look, there's the frame and the painting is sitting there in the frame and you can just sort of look at it. It's like, no, after the music is finished, the painting is gone from the frame, you know, like it was only ever there while it was there, I guess.
That's right.
Do you have a favorite, this is a question to end on, do you have a favorite composer, song, piece, favorite, you know, the sort of favorite question?
Favorite question. Yeah, I think for me, Beethoven will always be a favorite composer of mine.
Ludwig.
Ludwig, yes, it's Ludwig.
Actually, my flatmates asked me if I could ask you, are you named after Ludwig van Beethoven?
Good question. And yes, I am. Let's not be silly. I'm named after someone cooler than Beethoven. King of Bavaria. He's the king in the 19th century who built all these magical castles. And then very, very close friends of Wagner. But yeah, he loved everything about fantasy and dreams and music. So I'm named after this guy, this creator of the castles, King Ludwig. But Beethoven to me he connects on every single level. He's so human. He is so human, and I can relate to him, and I think many people can. And when I hear his music and when I play it, I feel that I'm uncovering something of myself. I'm sharing something deeper than just face value. It's also exciting music to play. And I think I'll always go back to the Waldstein Sonata.
Yeah.
That always holds a special place in my heart. Not only does it feel good to play, often when I perform it, it's always been a very special event or a special occasion. And so, yeah, Beethoven's my man.
He's your man. Ludwig and Ludwig.
It's Ludwig and Ludwig.
Und Ludwig, yeah.
Yes. Ludwig mit Ludwig. Und
Well,
Fergus.
Having said all that, Ludwig, it's been really, really great to talk to you. Thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Thanks for unlocking thoughts and stories that I don't usually share. So, it's nice that you've taken interest. And yeah, hopefully whoever's listening to this will be able to take a couple of things away from it. And perhaps I might meet some of these listeners.
I have a very large audience, Ludwig. I'll have you know.
Yeah. I Mr. Popular. Big shout out to Bro for sponsoring today's talk with Ludwig and Fergus.